The morning she vanished, the world felt deceptively ordinary. I still remember the smell of coffee drifting through the apartment, sunlight cutting across the kitchen counter, and the soft hum of her favorite song playing from the speaker, the one she always sang out of tune. Everything was normal, down to the tiny note she'd left on the refrigerator. Dress fitting today. Don't be late for the cake tasting, okay? With a tiny heart drawn at the end. We were 3 days away from the wedding. Everything was set. The venue by the lake, the flowers she spent weeks choosing, the band that played that old soul song she loved. Friends had flown in. Family was already in town. She'd spent the night before talking about table placements, laughing about how nervous she was to walk down the aisle. So when she didn't pick up her phone that morning, I didn't panic. Not at first. She was probably with her maid of honor, lost in some last-minute wedding chaos. But hours passed. Noon bled into afternoon. My texts went unread. My calls went straight to voicemail. By evening, her phone was off. That was the first crack. I remember standing in our bedroom, staring at her half-open closet. Her dress was still there, untouched, wrapped in that delicate ivory garment bag. Her shoes lined up beneath it. Everything was in place, except for her. I called everyone. Her friends, her sister, her maid of honor, even the woman at the bridal shop. No one had seen her. No one knew anything. By midnight, the panic had set in like frost creeping across glass. By the next morning, the police were involved. People like to say you can't disappear in the modern world. They're wrong. She had vanished. Not a trace, not a footprint, not even a text goodbye. They asked me all the usual questions. Where was I the night before? How we fought? Did she seem stressed? Did I notice anything unusual? No, no, no. It was as if she had been swallowed whole by the air we shared. And then came the whispers. When someone disappears before a wedding, suspicion always turns toward the groom. I could feel it in the way her sister looked at me, like she wanted to believe I was innocent, but doubt lingered in her eyes. The detectives didn't say it out loud, but I saw it written on their faces. Groom, runaway bride, or worse. I barely slept. The nights blurred together. Every knock on the door made my stomach lurch. Every phone call felt like a lifeline that never reached. 3 days turned into 3 nights of not knowing whether the woman I loved was alive or dead. And then, on the 3rd night, the same night she should have been rehearsing her walk down the aisle, I turned on the TV. I don't even know why I did. Maybe to escape the silence. Maybe to drown out the screaming in my head. But as the local news rolled into the 10 p.m. segment, the anchor's voice froze me in place. Breaking news. Sources confirm that footage has surfaced of a woman matching the description of missing bride-to-be, Lily Evans. Her picture appeared in the corner of the screen. Our engagement photo, the one we took at the lake, with her laughing, hair blowing in the wind. And then they played the footage. It was grainy but clear enough. A security camera feed from an airport in another state, 6 hours away. She walked through the terminal in jeans and a white sweater, carrying a small duffel bag. No wedding dress. No suitcase. No hesitation. She didn't look scared. She didn't look lost. She looked calm, like she was walking away from something she'd already decided to leave behind. The world shifted under my feet. The police said she'd bought the ticket herself. A one-way flight. No credit card fraud. No abduction. She wasn't missing. She had left. But the question that hollowed me out was why. We had everything planned down to the smallest detail. She was the one who insisted on the big wedding. The one who made me swear to pick her up after the final dress fitting. The one who kissed me goodnight 2 nights before and said, "I can't believe this is finally happening." None of it made sense. The media loved the story, of course. Runaway bride vanishes before wedding. It had all the ingredients. Mystery, romance, betrayal. Reporters started camping outside my apartment. People I'd never met debated my life on morning talk shows. Some called me the villain. Others painted me as the heartbroken victim. But none of their versions matched the storm unraveling inside me. Because this wasn't a headline. This was my life. I replayed our last conversations over and over again. Every laugh, every touch, every moment. Was there a sign I missed? Did I do something wrong? Was this all just a story she'd written me into and then erased me from? On the 4th day, the wedding was officially canceled. The florist called. The band canceled their hotel. Her side of the family stopped answering my calls. The world was moving on from the story like it was yesterday's news. But I couldn't. I needed answers. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was lost. Confused. The woman I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with had simply stepped out of our story and into another without a single word. Then came the second blow. A friend sent me a link to a news interview on a national channel. At first, I thought it was a sick joke. But when I clicked it and saw her face, sitting under studio lights, smiling faintly at the host, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Lily Evans, the woman who vanished 3 days before our wedding. On live television, I leaned closer to the screen, searching for answers in her eyes. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't missing at all. She was telling her story. I felt trapped, she said softly, and I did what I had to do. The words sliced through me like glass. She was talking about me, about our life, about a cage I never even knew she felt trapped in. The host asked her if she had been in danger, if I'd done anything. She shook her head slowly. No, she said, but sometimes it's not about danger. It's about disappearing before you disappear inside someone else's life. The audience clapped, and in that moment, watching her on a screen surrounded by strangers, I understood something brutal. She hadn't just left me. She'd rewritten the story so that I was a villain she could escape from. But the truth, the real truth, was far messier than her polished version. And I wasn't about to disappear quietly. The interview played on a loop across every screen in the living room, the way a fire alarm repeats until you either flee the building or go deaf to the danger. I sat on the edge of the couch and let her words wash over me again, isolating each sentence like an investigator rewinding a confession. She spoke in careful fragments. She smiled when the host leaned in. She dabbed at the corner of one eye without smearing her makeup. Nothing about it was accidental. By morning, my phone was a museum of other people's certainty. Co-workers, classmates, family friends I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone sending their thesis on what kind of man I must be if my fiancée fled. I didn't answer. I showered, shaved, put on a clean shirt, and decided the one thing the show hadn't anticipated. I would not play my assigned role. I started with what I could prove. The police had already pulled her bank records for the morning she disappeared. I asked for what they couldn't bother with, context. Her last 3 months of charges told a quiet story the segment hadn't. 2 payments to an agency in New York called Brightline Media. A subscription to a secure cloud service. 3 Uber rides to a co-working space on the east side where we had no reason to be. And 2 weeks before she left, a purchase from a specialty travel store. RFID blocking sleeves. There was a plan long before there was a crisis. I drove to the co-working space first. The woman at the front desk gave me the kind of smile people save for men in suits asking for favors. "We can't share private member information," she said, practiced. So I didn't ask for her information. I asked if Brightline Media ever booked rooms here. Her eyes flickered, then smoothed. Sometimes. I thanked her, sat in the lobby, and emailed myself every trace I had so far. Paper trails talk when people won't. On my way out, a poster by the elevator stopped me. A panel on ethics of narrative ownership, sponsored by Brightline. The date? 2 days before Lily vanished. The speaker list? Producers, editors, a lawyer who specialized in defamation. My chest tightened. Lily hated panels. She called them performances of conviction. She had gone anyway. Back home, I called the only person who loved us both without choosing sides, my sister, Mara. She listened without interrupting, then said the thing I needed more than comfort. "You're looking at this like a breakup. Look at it like a production." A production? She's telling a story for strangers. Stories for strangers have casting, beats, sponsors, legal. Find a paper, Dan. She was right. Love had made me sentimental. Television had made Lily strategic. I hired a private investigator that afternoon, a woman named Nora who had a talent for finding hinges on doors you thought were walls. I gave her everything I had, transactions, timelines, the airport footage, and asked for patterns, not miracles. She nodded, scribbled a few questions, and left with the focus of someone who likes puzzles more than people. While Nora dug quietly, I did the loud thing. I emailed the show. Not the public address they flashed on the screen, but the producer whose name rolled by in the credits. I knew how to speak the language of liability. Owning a business will teach you that fast. I wrote that their guest, Lily Evans, had alleged emotional confinement without citing facts, that they aired suggestive copy alongside my name, that they had 3 days to provide every release she signed, or I would seek injunctive relief against rebroadcast. I didn't believe they'd comply, but leverage isn't a door. It's a window you threaten to open. The reply came in 20 minutes, which told me I had struck a nerve. It was the soft iron kind, cordial, vague, layered with compliments. We take concerns seriously. Our guest is committed to her truth. Our legal team is confident in our editorial standards. And then the line that mattered. Please direct further inquiries to counsel for Brightline Media. Brightline again. The loop closed. Ner called at dusk. Found your hinge, she said. Brightline's registry lists a boutique arm called Arcadia Storyworks. They consult on limited series and impact segments. Your fiancée met with them 4 times at that co-working space. Last, the day before she left. Consulted for what? I asked, though I already knew. A docu-series pitch titled Run. Working log line. 8 women, 8 escapes from expectations, from control, from the versions of themselves men built. Each episode ends with a new beginning. My voice failed me for a second. She pitched our life. Pieces of it, Nurse said. Enough to sell the beat. The room tilted, then steadied. Anger didn't come, not in the bright, stupid way it does when you want to throw a glass. What arrived was colder recognition. She had not run from the wedding. She had run toward an audience. The next morning, I went to see her mother. We hadn't spoken since the cancellation. Grief makes people choose enemies, but she let me in after a long stare. The house smelled like bread and lavender, the way it had the first night I ate there. On the mantel, the photo of Lily as a child on a carousel still leaned at the same angle, slightly crooked, full of motion. I saw the interview, I said. Her mother's hands tightened around a mug she wasn't drinking. Everyone saw the interview. I need to know if she called you before it aired. Silence stretched. Then, she left a message. Said she was safe, that she needed to do this for herself. Did she say for herself? Or for the show? The smallest wince. Both. I nodded. Thank you. At the door, she stopped me. You loved her in quiet ways, she said, voice low. She never knew what to do with quiet, nor delivered documents 2 days later. A copy of an NDA Lily had signed, an appearance release for preliminary taping, and a writer giving Arcadia access to ancillary materials reasonably necessary to authenticate the subject's journey. Ancillary materials is a phrase that should terrify anyone with a camera roll. It meant our texts, emails, photos, posts could become props. I needed one thing they didn't have, motive that wasn't slogan. So I rewound our last month, not like a fiancé, but like an editor. The night she couldn't sleep and asked what it would feel like to disappear without anyone making me justify it. The way she started narrating moments we were still living, taglines disguised as confessions. The day she visited the venue alone and came back glassy-eyed, like she had walked through a set she no longer believed in. And the ring. She took it off at night so it wouldn't snag on the sheets. She had never done that before, nor texted a new thread. There's a storage unit in her name. Pay as you go. Small. We met there at noon. Inside, for plastic bins, labeled in her clean print, high school, college, New York, and a 4th with a newer label, after. The first 3 were souvenirs. The last was a blueprint. It held an envelope of cash, a prepaid phone still in its wrapper, a printout of flights to 3 different cities, and a bullet point outline titled Episode 1, The Choice. Under it, 5 beats, pressured out catalyst flight reframe. Each beat had notes. Under catalyst, 1 word cake. The cake tasting she told me not to miss. I sat on the concrete floor and laughed once, a short bark that felt like it belonged to a different man. She hadn't improvised the interview. She had rehearsed it until it felt like truth in her mouth. That night, I watched the segment again with the outline beside me. She hit every beat, every pivot, even the reframe the producer probably fed through her earpiece. It's not about running from him. It's about running to myself. It would play well in clips. It already had. The next morning, my attorney filed a preservation letter to Arcadia and the network, instructing them to retain all communications, cuts, and pre-interviews. We weren't suing, not yet. We were asking them to keep the receipts. They answered with a letter that did not say the word no, which in legal is a different kind of yes. Nora's final call that week was quiet. "There's one more piece," she said. "A pilot sizzle cut. It's watermarked, but it leaked in a private forum I monitor. You want to see it?" I watched it alone. 38 seconds of brighter color correction than life deserves. Women sprinting down sidewalks in slow motion. Voiceovers about cages. A quick shot of Lily, my Lily, standing at our lake venue. Wind catching her hair, looking into the distance like the distance had asked her a question. Over the footage, a producer's voice. "We want the fiancé either contrite or cruel. If he won't give us one, we'll infer the other." Pause. Then Lily's voice, soft, decisive. "He'll stay quiet." I closed the laptop. I didn't. I opened it again and began to write. Not a takedown, not a thread, a record. Dates, times, receipts, screenshots, notes, and the story of two people who mistook performance for courage. I did not publish a word of it. I printed it, sealed it, and gave a copy to Mara, one to Nor, and one to my lawyer. Insurance, not revenge. Because something else had shifted in me while I chased facts. I no longer needed to win a narrative to live my life. But I would not let mine be stolen. On the 7th morning after she vanished, the show teased a follow-up. New developments in Lily's journey. I brewed coffee, opened the blinds, and felt a steadiness move into the room like furniture. Let them run it. Let them sell the beats they bought. If they wanted a villain, they would have to build him without my help. The follow-up aired on a Sunday night, the kind of primetime slot networks reserve for scandals that make people lean closer to the screen. I didn't watch it live. I let it record while I sat on the balcony of my apartment, the city stretching below me like a restless sea. I wasn't sure why I hesitated. Maybe because part of me still remembered the way her laugh sounded in the quiet of our living room. Maybe because watching her rewrite the story once had already cost me more than sleep. But eventually, I pressed play. The opening sequence was exactly what I expected. Moody strings, a wide aerial shot of the lake venue, and the anchor's polished voice narrating our story like it belonged to them. A fairy tale engagement turned national mystery. They called it a mystery, but they weren't trying to solve anything. They were selling the sensation of heartbreak. And the woman at the center of it was no longer Lily Evans, my fiancée. She was the runaway bride of Lakeport. Her image filled the screen again, perfectly lit, perfectly framed, sitting on a cream-colored sofa in a studio designed to look like a cozy cabin. She wore a pale blue sweater, soft waves in her hair, just the right amount of fragility around the edges. I could almost see the producer behind the camera and nodding in approval. She smiled just a little. When I left, I wasn't running from danger. I was running toward myself. The audience gave a sympathetic murmur, the kind networks love. The interviewer leaned forward, carefully measured. What was the moment you knew you couldn't go through with it? I held my breath. "The cake tasting," she said softly. He sat there talking about how perfect everything would be. And all I could think was, who's perfect? Mine or his? That wasn't how it happened. We sat at that table, and I asked her if she liked the lemon filling or if she wanted something richer. She laughed, said lemon was too light for her, that she wanted the chocolate hazelnut. I ordered the chocolate hazelnut. That was the moment she had written as her catalyst. A shared laugh, a flavor choice. The network edited it into a prison. She continued, "I loved him, but loving someone isn't the same as wanting the life they've built for you." The interviewer tilted his head, as if gently urging a confession. "And did you ever tell him that?" Her silence lasted just long enough to imply what they wanted. That I hadn't listened. That she'd tried, and I hadn't heard. It was clean. It was rehearsed. And it made a better story than the messy, quiet reality we actually lived. The rest of the segment followed the beats Nor had already warned me about. They cut footage from our engagement party, her laughing in a floral dress, me holding her waist. They added melancholy piano behind it, turned warmth into warning. Then came the part that twisted the knife. The interviewer said, "We reached out to Daniel Myers for comment. He declined." It was true. I had declined. But the way they framed it made it sound like guilt. Like silence from a man who had something to hide. My name trended for 12 hours after that broadcast. Not because people knew me, but because strangers loved a villain they could build together. Some call me controlling. Others call me dangerous. One thread called me the quiet type who snaps. It didn't matter that none of them had ever spoken to me. It mattered that they had footage and a woman who knew how to cry on cue. The thing about being dragged into someone else's story is that it doesn't matter how careful you are. They've already chosen your lines. Noor showed up at my door the next morning with coffee and a file. "They've shifted narrative from romance to empowerment," she said flatly. "That's the phase before merchandising." "Merchandising?" I asked. She handed me a printout. Pre-orders for a memoir. Run. One Woman's Escape from the Cage of Expectations. Author, Lily Evans. Release date, 6 months from now. I stared at it. She wrote a book? She pitched a book, Noor corrected. Someone else is writing it. But her name's on the cover. They'll ghostwrite everything. I leaned against the counter. This isn't just a story to her anymore. This is her career. Noor nodded slowly. And you the ghost they built it around. I didn't respond. Because there it was, the truth I'd been circling for days without admitting it aloud. To her, I was no longer a person. I was a plot device. The steady, unassuming fiancée she could escape to find herself. Every soft moment we'd shared had been stripped for parts and rebuilt into a drama people could buy. But this wasn't just about pride. They were building something that could follow me for years if I let it. A story like this sticks to you like smoke. Even if it isn't true, it lingers in rooms you haven't walked into yet. Employers Google you. Partners wonder. Doors close quietly, without ever telling you why. Noor saw the calculation flicker in my eyes. "You don't have to destroy her to reclaim your life," she said. "But you can't disappear from it, either." I knew she was right. I couldn't fight a narrative with silence anymore. Silence is powerful, but also leaves room for others to fill in their version. And Lily, or the producers behind her, were masters at filling blanks. That night, I wrote my own statement. Not for the tabloids. Not for the talk shows. For the record. I worked on it until 3 a.m., crossing out every sentence that sounded like rage. Rage would make me the monster they were already building. Calm would make me unshakable. When I was done, it wasn't long or dramatic. Just a quiet, factual correction of the story. I supported Lily's choice to live the life she wanted. What I don't support is the rewriting of the life we shared into something it never was. People don't owe the world their private stories, but they do owe the truth to those they shared it with. I wish her well, but I won't be a character in someone else's fiction. I gave the statement to Mara and Noor first. Mara squeezed my hand. Noor said, "Good. They can't twist that." The statement went out the next morning through a friend who worked in PR. Not to tabloids, but to one credible newspaper that still believed in facts over clickbait. It wasn't viral, but it reached exactly who it needed to. Quiet people, rational people, editors who understood restraint. The narrative didn't flip overnight. It never does. But something shifted. Threads that had once been dogpiles turned into debates. Some people asked why a man so dangerous sounded so calm. Others began to question why the show had framed me so heavily without evidence. I didn't need to win everyone. I just needed to remind the world that I existed beyond their script. A week later, my lawyer got a call from the network's legal department. Not to apologize, of course. To negotiate. They offered me a clarifying segment, a chance to tell my side. I didn't take it. They weren't interested in truth, only ratings. But their offer told me something important. They'd felt the pressure. I wasn't invisible anymore. And that was enough to start changing the shape of the story. I still dreamed about her sometimes. Not the version on TV, carefully powdered and rehearsed, but the real Lily. The girl who fell asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms. The one who left handwritten notes on the fridge. The woman who looked at the lake house like it was a promise. But that Lily wasn't on TV. She wasn't in the book. She wasn't in the story they were selling. She was gone. And I wasn't going to spend my life trying to resurrect her from someone else's script. The first real silence after the media storm came on a Tuesday morning. I woke up before sunrise, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the city wake up in slow motion. For weeks, every morning had been consumed by noise. The news cycle, notifications, strangers pretending to know the truth about my life. But that morning, the world felt still. It wasn't peace exactly. More like the hush after a storm has ripped through a town and left everything standing, but changed. My statement had done its job. It hadn't erased the narrative they'd built, but it fractured it. People were questioning, dissecting, pulling at threads. Some of our fans dismissed me, but others paused. And in the media, hesitation is oxygen. The producers at Brightline and Arcadia could feel it. Their story depended on me being silent, flat, predictable. My calm refusal to play the role had cracked the stage beneath them. Nur called that morning. "We got something," she said, her voice sharp like someone holding a blade carefully. One of Arcadia's junior editors just reached out anonymously. "They're leaking clips." "What kind of clips?" "Uncut interviews. Lily's pre-tape." I didn't move. For a second, the air in the room felt thick. "Send it." The file was big, too big for email. Nur sent me a secure link. When I pressed play, the world I thought I knew started peeling away in real time. The clip opened in the studio, the same pale blue sweater, the same soft lighting. But there were no audience cues, no music, no perfect cuts. Just Lily. Real Lily. Except she wasn't quite the Lily I'd loved. The producer's voice was clear behind the camera. "When you talk about feeling trapped, Lily, can you make it more personal? Like, how did he make you feel that way?" She hesitated. "He didn't make me feel trapped," she said slowly. "It was more like the idea of the life. Like I was drowning in expectations. But Dan's not a bad guy." A pause. "Okay," the producer said. "But the audience won't connect to expectations. They connect to people. You need to center him in emotional weight. Don't lie, just frame it." Lily shifted uncomfortably, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Frame it how?" "Make the emotions tangible," the producer coaxed. "Say he didn't see me, or he wanted to build a world where I disappeared. Something they can feel." And then, after another pause, the kind of pause where people stop being who they are and start becoming who they think the world wants them to be, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. The next lines were the ones they aired. Word for word. Only now, I'd seen the birth of the performance. Not born of pain, born of persuasion. I paused the video. My hand shook, not from rage, but from something colder. A betrayal that wasn't about love anymore. It was about being rewritten. Someone had taken my life, rearranged it like a sentence, and decided how the world should read it. Nora's voice on the phone broke through the quiet. "This is gold, Dan. If this goes public, their story collapses." I stared at the frozen frame on my screen, her downcast eyes, the soft vulnerability that wasn't real. It would have been so easy to hit upload. One link, one leak. The world would turn against her in hours. But the part of me that hadn't been burned yet, the part that still believed in dignity, stopped me. "This isn't just about breaking her story," I said slowly. "It's about making sure mine isn't dragged through the mud forever." "Then we use it smart," Nur replied. "Not loud. Strategic." The next step wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. Nur connected me with a quiet but lethal media attorney, the kind of man who speaks softly because he knows people will listen. His name was Aaron. Gray suit, unflinching eyes. I played the uncut clip for him in his office. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. When it ended, he exhaled through his nose like someone confirming what they already knew. "This," he said, "is what they call a ticking bomb. They manipulated her on camera," I said. "They built a narrative out of nothing." "They built a product," Aaron corrected. "And you, Daniel, are the unlicensed intellectual property. They've used your name, your face, your relationship. That gives us options." He laid it out clearly. If I wanted, we could file an injunction to block the network from airing anything further using my identity. We could pursue a defamation case, expensive, messy, but winnable. Or we could go quiet but heavy, present the evidence to their legal department, and negotiate everything they didn't want the public to know. I didn't want to sue Lily. I didn't want a war. I just wanted my life back. Aaron made the first move 2 days later. A single, clean letter sent to Brightline, Arcadia, and their distributors. No shouting, no press release, just a warning, supported by a 28-minute uncut clip and timestamps that would make any legal team sweat. Their response was almost immediate. Not public, of course. They didn't want the world to see their empire wobble. It came through their lawyers, polished, careful, nervous. They wanted a meeting that took place in a glass conference room that smelled like money and panic. Across from me sat 3 lawyers, a PR director, and a producer who wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Nurse sat to my left, Aaron to my right. They opened with soft words. We value Lily's story. We respect Daniel's privacy. This is a misunderstanding. Aaron leaned forward once they'd finished spinning their silk. Misunderstanding doesn't come with timestamps, gentlemen. And it certainly doesn't come with a producer coaching a witness to turn a fiancé into a villain for narrative appeal. So let's not waste time. The PR director swallowed visibly. What exactly is it you want? For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. 3 things, Aaron said for me. 1. An immediate legal commitment to remove Daniel's name and likeness from all future promotional material, episodes, and press surrounding the show and its spin-offs. 2. A formal statement issued by the network clarifying that Daniel Myers is not accused of any wrongdoing and was not consulted or involved in the series. And 3. A quiet settlement for the unauthorized use of his personal story to be negotiated privately. They didn't like it. I could see it in the twitch of their jaws, the way the producer shifted in her seat. But they also didn't argue. They knew what that clip could do if it ever reached the public. The meeting stretched 2 hours. They tried to haggle. We didn't budge. When I walked out of that room, I wasn't a story anymore. I was a liability they needed to contain. A week later, they issued their carefully worded statement. The upcoming series run is a dramatized account inspired by multiple experiences. No allegations have ever been made against Daniel Myers, and he was not involved in any way in the creation or production of the program. We regret any confusion caused by previous coverage. It wasn't an apology, but it was on record, and that mattered more. Slowly, my name slipped out of headlines. The hashtags shifted to other scandals. My inbox quieted. The world, fickle as it was, moved on to its next spectacle. But the weight inside me didn't lift right away, because beneath the legal victories and strategic silence, a truth still lived quietly in my chest. She had chosen this. Not the producers, not the network. Lily. She had walked into that studio and let them turn our story into currency. And no settlement in the world could rewrite what that meant. I sat at the lake house a few nights later, the one we were supposed to honeymoon in, staring at the water. The silence that was different, not empty, heavy, real. For the first time, I let myself grieve. Not the woman she'd become on television, but the woman I once believed I'd build a life with. And in that quiet grief, something unexpected began to bloom. Not rage, not bitterness, clarity. The thing about clarity is it doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives quietly, like dawn seeping through curtains you forgot to close. That night at the lake house, as the wind pressed softly against the glass and the reflection of the water shifted like a restless memory, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an explanation, not for a text, not for Lily. In the weeks after the legal statement, her name stopped echoing so loudly in my inbox. Reporters moved on to newer stories. Comment sections dried up. Even Brightline stopped airing replays of that first exclusive interview. But silence is a strange thing. It doesn't always feel like peace at first. Sometimes it's like standing in an empty theater after the last act, hearing the faint echoes of applause that wasn't really for you in the first place. I stayed at the lake house for a few days, away from the constant hum of the city. The wedding decorations had been packed away months ago, but their ghost lingered. The soft lights still wrapped around the porch beams. The faint chalk marks from the rehearsal dinner layout remained on the deck. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was archaeology. I was standing in the ruins of a life that never happened. On the 3rd night, Nur came to visit. She walked in like she always did. No knocking, just the sound of her boots against the wooden floor. She handed me a cup of coffee without asking if I wanted one. "You look less haunted," she said simply. "Haunted people don't leave the lights on," I replied. She sat across from me, eyes sharp but calm. "You did something a lot of people don't," she said. "You got your name back without burning the world down." I stared out at the water. It doesn't feel like a victory. It's not supposed to, Nurse said. It's just freedom. And freedom's quiet. She wasn't wrong. After she left, I walked down to the dock barefoot, feeling the old wood under my feet. For so long, that dock had been a symbol of what Lily and I were building together. We'd stood there talking about honeymoon plans, about future kids, about names and dreams. It was where I'd proposed. Now it was just a dock, and somehow that was okay. 2 weeks later, I got a call I didn't expect. Her mother. We hadn't spoken since the day after Lily disappeared. She'd been polite but distant at the time, torn between loyalty to her daughter and the quiet understanding of the man who'd loved her. Her voice on the phone now was soft. "Daniel, she wants to talk to you." I didn't respond immediately. The part of me that used to ache at the sound of Lily's name stayed still. "Why?" She says it's not about the show or the lawyers. She just wants to talk. I could have said no. I had every reason to. But curiosity isn't something you can just switch off. I said yes, but on my terms, at the lake house in daylight with no cameras, no producers, no performance. Just her and me. The day she came, the air carried that soft chill right before spring finally gives up pretending it's winter. I saw her car pull up the gravel path, the same silver sedan she'd driven when we went venue shopping. She stepped out slowly, like someone walking into a memory they weren't sure they deserved to touch. She looked different, not glamorous like the woman on TV. Simpler. No studio makeup, hair tied back, a soft jacket against the breeze. She looked human again. "Hey," she said. "Hey." For a long moment, we just stood there on the porch. It was an awkward silence. It was heavy silence, the kind that knows too much to pretend otherwise. She broke it first. "I thought this place would feel smaller." "It's the same," I said. "We're the ones who changed." Her eyes flickered. "You're angry." "No," I said honestly. "I was. I'm not anymore." She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected worse. "I thought I'd walk in here and you'd hate me. Or yell. Or something." I laughed once low, not cruel. "I think we're past yelling." She exhaled, the kind of breath people take when they've been holding it for months. "I didn't come to explain the show," she said. "I know what it was. I know what I did. And I know what I let them turn you into." I said nothing. She continued anyway. "I panicked, Dan. Not about you. About me. I woke up 3 days before the wedding and felt like I was about to live the rest of my life as someone I didn't recognize. And instead of talking to you like a human being, I let them turn it into a story. Because stories are easier than honesty. Stories make you a hero or a victim. But talking to you would have meant being accountable. And I was a coward. The words didn't hit like knives. They just landed softly, like rain after a long drought. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I'll never forget what you did." She nodded. "I wouldn't ask you to." We sat on the porch for over an hour. No yelling, no begging, just two people picking through the bones of what used to be love. She told me the network had kept pushing for more sensational angles, that once she started it, she didn't know how to stop it, that she thought I'd hate her so much she'd never have to explain. "I wanted to disappear," she said quietly, "but I didn't want to be invisible. So I let them build me a stage. And I became the villain." She winced but didn't deny it. "Yes, you did. We didn't reconcile. We didn't forgive each other in some cinematic embrace. But there was a kind of brutal honesty between us that had never existed before. And maybe in some strange way, that was its own kind of closure. When she left, she stood by the car a moment longer. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for the cameras. Not for a script. Just her." "I know," I said. And that was enough. The world didn't stop for us. Her book still went forward, but my name wasn't in it. The network scrubbed my face from their promos. And me? I learned to breathe again. I started traveling more. Places I'd always talked about, but never visited because we were always saving or planning or waiting. I met new people. Laughed with strangers who didn't see me through a headline. Learned what silence sounded like when it wasn't empty. One night, in a small cafe in Lisbon, A woman asked me why I wasn't married. I smiled. Long story, I said. And for the first time, it didn't hurt to say that. Because the story wasn't about what she did to me anymore. It was about who I became after she left. There's a quiet kind of power in moving on without making an announcement about it. Not the kind where you blast it on social media or turn it into a performance for the world to watch. I mean the kind of power that lives in the stillness, in quiet mornings with no ghosts whispering in your chest, in drinking your coffee slowly, not because you're waiting for anything, but because you're finally at ease in your own company. By the time spring folded into summer, I'd rebuilt parts of my life I didn't even realize had crumbled. Work came back into focus. I stopped checking the news. I deleted every saved headline, every cached image of Lily on television, every bookmarked link I'd kept as evidence in case I ever needed to defend myself again. I didn't need evidence anymore. The world wasn't talking about me. And more importantly, I wasn't talking about her. The lake house, once a mausoleum for what never happened, became my sanctuary. I fixed the dock one weekend, repainting the wooden planks she used to lean against. I replaced the soft string lights she'd chosen with warmer ones that belonged to me. I even hosted a few friends there for the first time since everything imploded. They laughed, told stories, roasted marshmallows by the fire pit. And in the middle of their laughter, I caught myself smiling. Not because I was trying to be okay, but because I actually was. No cameras. No stage, no script, just life, messy and real. One of those nights, Mara asked me something she hadn't dared to before. If she called again, she said softly, not to explain, just to come back, what would you say? I stared into the fire. The question didn't hurt like it would have months ago. It just landed and dissolved like a spark fading into smoke. I wouldn't answer, I said. Not because I hate her, because I finally love my life more than the idea of her. Mara nodded, and for the first time, I could see she truly believed me. Life didn't magically turn perfect after that. It rarely does, but it became real. I started running in the mornings again, something I'd stopped when the world made me feel too small to move. I read books that had nothing to do with legal strategy or media wars. I cooked badly, then better. I met people who didn't ask about her, people who knew me only as me. And yet, her shadow wasn't gone entirely. It lived at the edges of my life, not like a wound, but like a faint scar you forget about until you touch it. Sometimes I'd hear her name mentioned online in passing, about the book, or an upcoming talk she was giving about freedom and courage. And every time, it felt distant, like she belonged to another world entirely. She did. She'd become a face for a movement she'd helped fabricate. She wasn't the woman who laughed with me in the kitchen at 2 a.m. anymore. She wasn't the girl who walked barefoot along the lake dock in the rain. She wasn't my fiancée. She was a brand, and I was no longer a part of it. One morning in late July, Nurse sent me a message. A single line. She's doing a live panel in New York. Big press. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't sure why Nurse sent it. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because some part of her wanted me to see what I'd escaped. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I watched the live stream. There she was, polished, confident, the soft blue light casting a flattering glow across her face. She told the story again, like a fable she'd memorized. She talked about freedom, about choosing herself, about walking away from the expectations of others. And then something happened. Someone in the audience, a woman, maybe late 40s, asked, "What about the man you left? Did you ever talk to him?" Lily froze for just a second, just long enough for people who knew her to notice. "Yes," she said carefully. "We talked. He's doing fine. It's complicated." The host tried to steer the conversation back, but that one flicker stayed with me. She wasn't untouchable. She was just human. And her story, the one that once swallowed mine whole, wasn't as clean as she'd sold it. For the first time, watching her didn't feel like being stabbed. It felt like watching a stranger on TV. And that's when I knew she didn't know me anymore. That summer, I met someone new. Her name was Amelia. She worked in architecture, not media. She didn't care about trending hashtags or polished narratives. I met her at a bookstore, of all places, both reaching for the same battered copy of a travel memoir. She made some joke about fate, I said something awkward about shared taste in obscure writers. And somehow, we ended up talking for hours over coffee. I didn't tell her about Lily at first. Not because I was hiding it, because it wasn't the center of my story anymore. When I finally did, I kept it simple. I was supposed to get married. She left. It turned into a thing. It's not who I am. Amelia didn't flinch. She didn't ask for details or headlines. She just said people leave, but it doesn't mean they get to define what's left. She didn't look at me like a man with a scandal attached to his name. She looked at me like a person. That alone felt revolutionary. We started seeing each other more. Slowly. Carefully. No rush. No expectations. Just two people building something quiet, one conversation at a time. Meanwhile, Lily's world kept spinning fast. Book launches, speaking engagements, polished social media posts. The same kind of performance that had nearly erased me. But while she was on stages telling people how she ran toward herself, I was actually living mine. There's a difference between performing freedom and having it. I stopped checking her name after that. Nor still sent me the occasional update, but I barely opened them. My life no longer orbited around her choices. The lake house wasn't a memory anymore. It was just home. Months passed. Seasons changed. One late autumn evening, I received a letter. Not an email. A letter. Her handwriting. It was short. Not a confession. Not a plea. Just a few words. I saw you doing well. I'm glad. I hope you're happy. I'll carry the way I left forever. Lily. I folded it carefully and slid it into a drawer. I didn't need to respond. Some stories end with words. Others end with silence that's strong enough to hold everything unsaid. For the first time since the day she vanished, I didn't feel the pull to fix anything. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't even feel victory. I just felt free. She had chosen to vanish 3 days before the wedding. And in doing so, she unknowingly handed me the one gift she never intended to give, the chance to build a life that didn't revolve around her. The following week, I stood on the dock at the lake house again. The water rippled under a pale gold sky. I breathed in the sharp cold air of November. The version of me who had once stood there waiting, devastated, was gone. In his place was someone quieter, stronger, whole. I whispered to the wind, not for her, but for me. You don't get to own my story anymore. And the world, finally, was silent enough to hear it. The night the last piece of her shadow left me was colder than usual. The lake was still, reflecting the pale winter moon like a mirror I could finally look into without flinching. I walked down the old dock, hands in my jacket pockets, breath curling in the air like smoke from a fading fire. There was no anger left in me, no ache, no need for answers, just quiet. It's strange, the way freedom settles in. It doesn't explode. It doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. It just arrives, softly, patiently. After months of noise and headlines and strangers dissecting my pain like it was a puzzle for their entertainment, there was finally nothing. And that nothing felt like everything. I thought about the version of myself who'd stood on this dock the night she vanished. The man with shaking hands, with the ring still warm in his pocket, wondering how a life can unravel in 3 days. That man had been desperate for an explanation. He believed closure was something she could give him. But closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build quietly, brick by brick, the moment you stop begging for permission to heal. She'd written a story that turned me into a ghost. But I had written my own ending, one without her name in the last line. Behind me, the lights from the lake house glowed warm against the dark. Amelia was inside, reading with her feet tucked under a blanket. She didn't know all the details of what I'd endured, and she didn't need to. She understood the only part that mattered. I had come out the other side. And that, not revenge, not validation, not the clearing of my name in headlines, was victory. People will talk. They'll believe what they want to believe. Some still think I'm the villain in her story, but they don't get to write mine. They never did. I walked to the end of the dock and let the wind brush against my face, sharp and clean. I closed my eyes and listened. No sirens, no camera shutters, no whispers, just water moving, slow and steady, like the sound of a life rebuilding itself. I smiled, not the tight smile of someone pretending to be okay, the real one, The one that comes when you realize you don't owe the past anything anymore. I whispered it again, this time not to the lake, not to the world, but to myself. She doesn't own my story. And with that, the last thread that tethered me to her unraveled into the night. The world didn't applaud. No orchestra played. No cameras recorded the moment. But it was the truest ending I could have